In a small town in western New York, there's a small public college called SUNY Oneonta. If you're not from New York, there's a good chance you have never heard of it, at least before this year, when the school made national news for having the most COVID-19 cases in New York, with over 700 cases within just 2 weeks of the school opening. Videos went viral of students waking up in the middle of the night to people in hazmat suits, ready to put them in the back of a van and take them to the isolation dorm, as well as the school's president resigning and fingers being pointed on who's to blame. Students feared going into town, as the locals kicked them out of their businesses and yelled at them to leave. It is clear the school and students didn't follow proper precautions when returning to campus. But how did this situation get so out of hand? The COVID-19 pandemic has affected many communities. SUNY Oneonta and the Oneonta community saw an unprecedented rise in cases when students went back in the fall. The school came up with a restart plan in the beginning of the semester. This plan was left to each individual school instead of one plan for all the SUNY schools, and each school could decide to be strict or lenient regarding testing. In this plan, many aspects of campus life were addressed, like frequent sanitation and changes to on-campus living. Regarding testing, students were not required to have a negative test for COVID-19 to start their fall semester. They only must attest that they have no symptoms and quarantine for a week prior. In addition, health screening questionnaires are emailed to students every day. As stated in an article for the New York Times, the spokeswoman for the school said that this decision was made based on the CDC guidelines. On the second day of classes, 2 students tested positive. Each day, there were an increased number of cases. So, the school conducted pool testing for students living on campus and using campus facilities, and pop-up testing sites were announced by the governor. On August 30th, in accordance with the New York State guidelines for infection rates for colleges, campus activities were suspended for 2 weeks and classes were all virtual. In addition, 5 students and 3 organizations were suspended for hosting large parties off campus. 2,500 students on campus and 200 faculty were tested for the virus. 2 days alone, 218 people tested positive. A SWAT team was deployed on the campus to help contain the cluster of cases. These high numbers also prompted the school to move all classes virtually, moved out of their dorms within a few days. Hannah Padigiz, a student at SUNY Oneonta, was living on campus during the school's shutdown. After learning that students are going to be sent home, Hannah was not thrilled about the situation. In an interview, Hannah said, "I was very upset because I didn't want to be away from campus, but wasn't surprised to learn that campus was shutting down after seeing so many other students going out and breaking social distancing protocols." Being on campus during the outbreak in Oneonta, Hannah had a quarantine in the dorms before the official notice of being sent home. It was pretty difficult to stay isolated in the dorms, but luckily my suite mates and I communicated with each other a lot and took drives together in order to feel less isolated, says Hannah. Like many other students, Hannah did not isolate before coming back to Oneonta, because the school would not have known if she or other students actually did quarantine before arriving on campus. Although the school did recommend quarantining, it was never required to do so. When asked who she believed was to blame for the start of the outbreak on campus, Hannah said, "I feel that everyone was somehow responsible for the campus shutdown, students and faculty both. The students should have off the bat taken things seriously, but when administration shows that they don't really care, there's always going to be people who break the rules and take advantage of that." Hannah, unlike most on-campus students, was luckily able to find a new place to live in Oneonta and stay in the city for the semester. Most on-campus students went back to their hometowns after the shutdown. When it comes to the plans for the spring 2021 semester, Hannah did not seem to think that things would be much different from the fall 2020 semester. "I think the school is working towards better ways to contain the spread of COVID, but it depends on how strict they will be in enforcing the new protocols and how willing the students are to help the community stay healthy. I sadly believe that even with stricter protocols, the same thing will happen in spring of 2021 that happened in fall of 2020. Just maybe not as quickly," says Hannah. Due to the outbreak of COVID in Oneonta and how fast it spread, the school and the students have been looked at in a poor light. When asked about this, Hannah says, "It makes me sad that Oneonta is viewed in such a negative way by the public. However, it's not completely uncalled for. Many students do not seem to care about each other or the community as a whole, which seems very selfish. In response to the town's outbreak in COVID, many of the people who live in Oneonta were very upset with the Oneonta students. I'm not surprised as to how the people who live in Oneonta have been acting towards students. It sucks they hate students this much, but I don't blame them for feeling this way. Students act reckless and careless and then leave the townies to clean up the mess," says Hannah. Hannah, like most Oneonta students, is hoping to better the perspective people have on the school next semester. She is also hoping that now that the school has some experience with the situation, that next semester will be different than this semester was. Laura Felchow is a media studies professor at SUNY Oneonta. After the college's first in-person shutdown during the spring 2020 semester, Felchow did not feel confident about the partial reopening of SUNY Oneonta's campus for this fall 2020 semester, before it even started. In an interview, Felchow says, "I said we'd be back to remote by the first week. It's just not realistic." After teaching online classes throughout the summer, she was able to see how students were already not listening to COVID-19 guidelines, such as social distancing and wearing masks. Felchow doesn't blame the students entirely though. She goes on to say that the expectations of the school, such as providing testing and requiring testing, were not met in her opinion. Not only that, but countless students were moving back to campus without much safe face-to-face classes/activities held by the school that in her eyes, it was a guarantee students would get bored and look for that face-to-face contact elsewhere. In her opinion, many colleges are now, quote, trying to sell you the college experience but then telling you you can't have it when you're here. When asked how her classes have changed for her since going remote, she responded by saying that, when you're teaching face-to-face, you prep your lecture and then you go and you just give it. Now, not only do I have to do my lecture slides, I then have to go and record them. Then I have to upload them. Then I have to caption them for accessibility, and then set it up in Blackboard so my students can access them. A 2-step process has now become a 6-step process. When the college closed during the spring 2020 semester, Laura Felchow stated that, "I was working from 9 in the morning until 8 o'clock at night, 7 days a week." Sadly, Professor Felchow says that although it is more work teaching online, that it is clear that most of the students are less engaged and don't enjoy it. Professor Felchow thinks that the reason SUNY Oneonta's reputation was hit so hard by the COVID-19 pandemic was because we came back earlier than a lot of other SUNY schools by a week or two. Therefore, all eyes were on us. This meant that when we started having COVID-19 cases on campus, the media really picked up on it because we were the first ones. Felchow states that we got raked over the coals. There have been a lot of other SUNY schools with similar problems. Her opinion is that if SUNY Oneonta had started its fall 2020 semester a week or two later than it did, that yes, the COVID-19 cases would have still happened, but the media would have focused on the college less because we would have no longer been the first school with those issues, and therefore our reputation would be less damaged. She continues on to say that during the reopening and shutdown of SUNY Oneonta's campus, that she saw a lot of blame being passed around on Facebook and Twitter, stating that the majority of parents were blaming the administration of SUNY Oneonta, but that the majority of the outside community were blaming the students. Laura Felchow says that she personally doesn't think there is one single group of people to blame in this situation, but acknowledges that those out in the community only see a handful of students who more than likely live off campus and aren't regulated by the school and make their full judgment of SUNY Oneonta in regards to the pandemic, based solely on those 80 of 6,000 students that attend SUNY Oneonta's college. When it comes to the spring 2021 semester, regardless of the new plan or actions put in place by the administration of SUNY Oneonta, Professor Felchow states that it might not happen as quickly as this past semester, but that she still thinks the school will yet again shut down on-campus activity and return to only remote learning. Only about 900 kids will be living on campus, but Felchow, along with countless others, know even more students will be living off campus in apartments, whether they have in-person classes or not. And the reality is that the school has no power over these students that live in town but do not use campus facilities. She goes on to say that there's a lot of tension there because the school does need the money to stay financially solvent. Personally, Laura Felchow says that she prefers in-person teaching, thinks most of the faculty would agree, but that they realize this isn't the safest reality. Sadly, Felchow states that a lot of us professors are aware of going back just because the school has demonstrated that they are not as invested in faculty safety as they are in student money. It is important to stay realistic right now, and in faculty's eyes, the administration might be a little too optimistic instead. Felchow says that over the last 2 weeks, there has been an increased amount of pressures from administrations for teachers to volunteer to teach face-to-face for this coming spring semester. She says, "A lot of fear around that was not only COVID-19 and having to teach face-to-face, but because they also wanted us to do dual modality. This means that teachers will be asked to teach both online and in-person classes at the same time. With SUNY Oneonta's promise to have reliable technology, live streaming cameras, and student production assistance accessible for teachers that are willing to do so." Professor Felchow was not the only teacher questioning the truthfulness and dependability of these promises, though I'm sure. Felchow's guess is that outbreaks will happen over winter break and Governor Cuomo will call for another lockdown/quarantine, causing all schools to go remote for the spring semester. If this doesn't happen, Felchow is scared that SUNY Oneonta will see a rerun of last semester. On the other hand, if the governor calls for a shutdown, the acting president for SUNY Oneonta can argue that the school tried, set a plan, and were ready, but that things fell apart state-wise, which Professor Felchow argues might be able to improve SUNY Oneonta's reputation slightly. On October 5th, President Barbara Jean Morris submitted her resignation to pursue other opportunities. On October 15th, SUNY Chancellor Jim Malatras announces Dennis Craig as SUNY Oneonta's acting president. We had the opportunity of speaking to the president about its transition into the new position and the future plans for the campus community. New acting president Dennis Craig has faced many challenges taking on SUNY Oneonta at their most vulnerable point. At his previous school, SUNY Purchase, he has developed the COVID Response Task Force, a group of people dedicated to containing the spread, monitoring, testing, and rising cases. He applied the same task force to Oneonta. However, Oneonta was in much worse shape than Purchase. Craig stated in an email interview, "When I left that campus in mid-October, there was a total of 3 positive student cases after nearly 8 weeks into the semester. By that point in Oneonta's semester, students had been home for a month. Craig's task force looks promising purely based off his previous track record. Oneonta's biggest mistake is the beginning of the semester was not requiring testing or mandatory quarantines before returning to campus." In an article written for Press Connect's author Joseph Spector states, "Some SUNY schools, such as Binghamton University, required all resident students to be tested for COVID-19 upon their return to campus for the fall semester. But SUNY Oneonta did not do so, instead telling students to self-quarantine at home for 7 days before moving in. This major flaw created problems before anything else could. Without requiring students to have a negative test result before returning, the campus was already at a disadvantage. Students who returned to campus may have been doing all of the right things. However, they could have caused a spread because they were not aware they were asymptomatic." SUNY Oneonta's campus took a hit, but the surrounding community was also crucially impacted. The community had many mixed reactions to the outbreak in cases. Some restaurants were refusing to serve students of SUCO for fear of them being infected and passing it to their employees. Some Oneonta tattoo parlors require all students to show a negative COVID test before entering their facility. When Craig was asked what his goals for the SUNY Oneonta community, as well as the Oneonta community as a whole, he responded, "To heal together, collaborate with our campus governance, and begin a path back to the Oneonta that our community has great affection for. A residential campus with intellectual and social experiences that lead to enrichment and a way of fulfilling lives after our students graduate. No one wants Oneonta to be divided, especially during a time where communal support is needed for everyone." SUNY Oneonta's name and reputation has taken a hit during the fall semester. Right now is the most important time for high school seniors as they look into colleges and begin touring campuses. With a quick Google search of SUNY Oneonta, Prospective students can see articles written about this failed fall semester. When Craig was asked how he will restore the reputation of SUNY Oneonta, he stated, "I will continue to advance the improvements in communication that many have commented on over the last month, while working with faculty and staff on enrollment and image building marketing that tells the Oneonta's success story. Repairing our image is vital to ensuring that new students feel this is a safe and healthy environment for them to start their college careers." The spring 2021 semester has been heavy on everyone's mind. How that semester is handled could ruin or could repair the reputation of SUNY Oneonta, which puts a lot of pressure on Craig and his team, specifically the COVID response task force. Students and faculty share fears of returning to campus. When Craig was asked how he will help students feel safe on campus, he responded, "Pre-arrival testing is required, as well as weekly surveillance testing. There's a uniform code of conduct with zero tolerance policies that was not in place when the fall semester began, but prevention will be especially important. These actions seem promising for a smoother and healthier spring semester." Next to not requiring testing before returning to campus, off-campus parties cause much of the uproar in cases. The off-campus student population needed more structure and better outlined guidelines. Craig stated, "Dr. Franklin Chambers will focus exclusively on our off-campus student population, making sure they are getting tested, launching better communication and prevention initiatives, creating more support for off-campus students, and explicitly laying out a new foundation can improve the Oneonta community as a whole, from on-campus to off." Students have the power to create a better spring semester by holding themselves and their peers accountable. Keeping the Oneonta community safe and healthy is a joint effort from campus to the larger community. President Craig says, "Students can play a role by working with their fellow students and the college to maintain social distancing. When dealing with COVID-19, no plan is ever final. At this stage of the pandemic, it is inexcusable to not wear a mask or follow social distancing guidelines. Students and faculty must be ready for any and all changes that will come with this semester. No one achieves anything alone, and at this scale, we need everyone to be responsible for their actions as well as reminding others to stay responsible." The school has announced a plan for reopening in the spring semester. This plan allows for 1,070 students to return to campus. On campus, students will be placed in single rooms and have their meals through takeout. In-person classes will take place but will be limited. Students will be required to provide proof of a negative COVID-19 test if they are living and or visiting the campus. This information will be submitted through an online portal. They will also have to take a daily questionnaire and quarantine a week before arriving to campus. Off-campus students are now required to test weekly and participate in pool testing. The Vice President of External Affairs will actively engage with the off-campus community and establish a neighborhood watch program. The total number of confirmed cases since the start of the fall semester is 741, as of November 30th.